Welcome, and everybody is having a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you for attending Retaining Millennials, Cultivating the Next Generation Through Career Pathing. My name is Linda Ginac, and I am the CEO of TalentGuard. Also the author of Fake Perfection, it's about career transition, and the Professional and Career Management Training System. I'm delighted to have you here, and thanks for all of those repeat attendees. I really appreciate your confidence in the presentations. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. The presentation will be available for download later via email. Also, it's going to be published on a website, but we usually send an email out to let you know that it's available for download, and we will provide both the audio and the presentation. In addition, I will answer questions, but I'd like to hold them till the end of the presentation, but feel free throughout any time to provide your questions via the chat box. And again, like I said, I'll answer them at the end. So without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation. Who are millennials? Who are they, and how can we help them be successful in our businesses? Millennials were born between 1982 and 2003. There are approximately 10,000 millennials that turn 21 every day in America. That number is astounding to me. They are the largest generation on the planet. One of the terms that I like to describe the millennials is that they're digital natives. They're the first generation to grow up using all sorts of technology, from iPhones, Xbox, Wii's. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. They stream their music through Spotify. They are very savvy with how and what they use to communicate, to engage, and to learn. This is also the generation that's really getting involved in gamifying everything. So I know a lot of learning management organizations are thinking about how to integrate that into their organization development platform when they're trying to educate employees on certain things within the organization. 75% use social media compared with 30% of baby boomers, and they are one of the most educated generations in America. I have a millennial, and it's amazing to me the level of research that he does in order to learn about companies. For example, never before has a generation had more access to feedback about your company, whether it's through Glassdoor or LinkedIn or Twitter. The people that you will hire will know more about your organization than probably you do because they are researching it. And if you think back even 5 or 10 years when I was doing recruiting on campuses, it was so difficult for me to interview and find someone who knew anything about my company other than my name. So that has really changed the game, the social aspect of the millennials and where they're going and how they're using talent to do something pretty profound. Let's think a little bit about the traits, both positive and some of the things that are challenging for us to manage in the workforce. They are multitaskers. Just speaking from my own personal experience, and I have millennials on my team, when I'm in a staff meeting, for example, they are texting on their iPhone, they are IMing on their computer, they're taking notes, and they're talking to me at the same time. So, you know, it's really hard for me, I'm kind of on the bridge of baby boomer versus the X generation, to look at them and think that they're paying attention or that they're engaged. I just want to tell them to put their cell phone away and pay attention. But the truth of the matter is that they are paying attention, and they've been raised in an environment where multitasking is acceptable. So we really need to take that into consideration when that happens in your environment, and that's just a small example. They're team players, not the kind of team players that just want to sit in a meeting and throw Post-it notes up on the wall. They want to engage, and what that means is they need to collaborate. They want to talk to you online. They want to see you online. They want to engage on projects. They want to have project boards. They want to have and share feedback. So it's not just a you, me in a conference room anymore. We need to enable them through automation to be a team player. especially because they're doing a lot of grunt work. So we need to bring them into the strategies of what we're working on and show them how they can be a team player on our team. They're very confident and optimistic, and they're entrepreneurial. And if I think about my own employees and even my son who's going off to college, I raised him to be independent, to be open-minded, to speak his mind, to take control, to not wait for anybody. You know, I was a latchkey kid, so that was instilled in me growing up as a parent, is how do I then further that so that they are independent, they're self-serving, they're efficient, they're resourceful. I think those are important traits that I believe are positive in this millennial generation. Some of the challenges is they get bored quickly. So if you're not keeping them engaged in work and they're sitting idle, they're basically going to move on. So how can you avoid that happening? They are challenging the old way, and it's not because they're rude. It is because they have grown up to challenge things, to do things differently, to think about things in new ways, and to say it. They're extremely impatient with career mobility. They want to move on. They don't want to wait 3 and 4 and 5 years for a promotion. They want to be able to experience new things, to try new responsibilities, to gain new skills. So we got to think of career mobility in the broadest sense of the word. Now, what's unfortunate is, you know, with all of the research that I've done for this presentation, as well as talking to some of our clients in the talent management space, is they get a bad rap, millennials do. And it's for, you know, all the reasons that I've said. They get a bad rap because people are thinking that they're disengaged and they want to do things their own way. Well, when you're raised in a certain environment in a certain way to be entrepreneurial and confident, it's really hard not to do that in the workplace. So how do we also retrain our organizations on millennials and on what to expect from a behavioral perspective so that we don't have some of that conflict between a multi-general workforce? So I think this quote sums it up really well. We wanted what they want. We just felt we couldn't ask for it. That's kind of my generation. You know, I always wanted to do something. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to try new things. But I was also taught, you know, basically keep your mouth shut and do a good job and you'll move up in the organization. Really, you know, so what's the truth in that? What young workers want is not so different from what everyone else wants. They're not afraid to ask. This is an organization, a generation that does not fear many things. You know, and they also ask a lot of questions and want a lot of feedback, but they're not afraid. And I think that's profound because I think it raises a level of transparency, organization, and if someone can says, hey, this is what I want or this is what I expect, they should get that reciprocal response. But there's quite a bit of friction that's occurring between, you know, some of the generations. But I think it starts a fundamental shift in our workforce of what we need to do in order to bring that transparency to the forefront in all that we do. So what's important to the millennials? Well, 56% of millennials won't accept a job from companies that ban social media, and I work with many organizations who, from an IT perspective, turn off access to certain URLs. Well, guess what? You're not going to stop them. They're going to go out on their lunch break or their break. They're going to use their cell phones, their iPhones, their smartphones, whatever it is. They're going to get to where they want to be. So is that doing you any good, or is it working against you? I would surmise that it works against you. I haven't really found any studies that says it really has a negative impact to productivity. 23% of millennials say career advancement opportunities are their top priority, and it's not your traditional career advancement up the ladder. They want to increase in skill development. And in addition to that, I think this is the generation that wants on-the-spot feedback and recognition for the work that they're doing, and they want it often. They don't want to wait for the annual performance review to get feedback from their manager. So we're seeing that tremendous shift in the social enterprise 2.0, who are really trying to break down those trust barriers by enabling people to communicate more often and on more things and in more ways. Why is this important to you as an HR professional? Well, the first and foremost, I like what Bruce Tullogan said about millennials, and in that is, it is the most high maintenance workforce in the history of the world, but they're also going to be the most high performing. And they're the most high performing because they're multitasking on everything, and they're shortening the window from the time it takes to put something out there, get feedback, and act upon it. If we're really truly making it real time, we're going to be able to know what we're doing, if we're doing it well, how we need to course correct, and how do we produce work that matters so it makes an impact to the bottom line. So I really do see that shift happening, and I think it's very powerful, and I do agree with this statement. But in addition to that, why is it important? Because it's going to be the largest population in the global workforce. In addition to that, new hires take 3 years longer to perform as well as an internal hire, and new hires are paid significantly more. So there is this long onboarding trend that's happening that we need to really account for, and if it takes 3 years and the average tenure is 2 years in any organization, we really need to fix that, because we're going to be doing a lot of recruiting, investing a lot of money in an asset, meaning the human capital, that is not going to stay very long. And this just reminds me of the dot-com burst, when there was a lot of poaching going on between companies, especially in Austin, that's where we are, where companies were, the average tenure went from that 30 years at a traditional company like an IBM to 1 and 2 years, because people were jumping ship, going to all of these really great startups. But I didn't see that trend really stop. I mean, I think that trend is still going on, and our children saw us making those job hops to get ahead and to get new experiences and to further our skills. So it's almost commonplace for them, when in reality it's not really a good strategy for millennials, and it's certainly not a good strategy from an HR perspective when we're trying to build companies and increase knowledge and increase intelligence and all of those things that are required to have a great employer brand. So what are some keys to retaining millennials so that we can increase retention, which ultimately leads to higher corporate performance? First and foremost, let's talk about just the fundamental basics based on some of the research that we did. What do we have to have regardless of any talent practices? Well, we need to provide a way for them to listen and to be heard, to engage, and to collaborate on work that matters. So beyond just the vision and the mission, which is very, very important, we need to be able to demonstrate the big picture. And what is the big picture? Well, to a millennial, it's understanding what is happening in the organization from a strategic executive boardroom perspective. What's important to the company? Where are the challenges? Why are we picking the strategies that we're picking? How is it going to move the needle? And how do I impact that big picture? Where do I fit? Even though I'm coming in as a millennial, I'm new, I'm gaining skills. How do I fit in? And what opportunities do I have as an individual to get beyond that first role that I take with your company to really make a significant impact in the big picture? In addition to that, that big picture, as you saw in some of the research, needs to tie back to something that is socially and from a corporate perspective responsible. So what does the big picture look like? And I don't really have any other way to show you this in terms of words, so I'm going to use some pictures. So the first picture is corporate transparency. And when you're thinking about corporate transparency, what we're talking about is answering the question, what method are you using to communicate what those top 5 or 10 strategies are and how those strategies relate to execution, and execution being what divisions are they impacting, what departments, and how are the people contributing to those on a department to department, goal by goal level, so that we know we're all on the same page. Now, if anybody has a better visual other than just a corporate screenshot of our software, please let me know. But I wanted to show you this, and you may have other ways to show this, that how does everything roll up that everybody in the organization can see what you're working on. You have to be able to do that. The old way of executives going into the boardroom, having a meeting, coming up with the goals, everybody coming out, creating a fishbone in PowerPoint, sending those fishbones up to our senior team, it just doesn't work. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've tried to execute that process over and over again. The paper just gets shelved. So we have to make it real. We have to make it part of our everyday work. We have to do that. And there's only way you can do that is through automation. So whatever way, whether you develop something internally with your IT department or you use some vendor's tool, you have to figure out how for the millennials to bring corporate transparency to the forefront, first and foremost. And in addition to that, it's not just that high level. How are they able to see how it cascades throughout in an organization to ensure that they know they're working on things that tie up to the overarching goals that matter? So how do you make it real? How do you make it living? Well, I think automation is a good key. So as I said, these are just some screenshots for you to consider. Now, the second thing that's important is that continuous feedback. And I just thought this was a great image because you have two people who have to create momentum for the employee to perform. So how do we take this kind of a concept where it's ongoing and enable employees to give and receive feedback, not just from their managers, but from their peers, from customers? And there's a lot of movement in the industry about informal feedback. So what does informal feedback really mean? Well, it means that you're able to, much like in a Facebook way or a LinkedIn way, give feedback to anyone anytime you want, or receive feedback from anyone at any time that they want to give it, especially with the managers. Now, when you look at the stats for informal feedback, 35% of millennials want to communicate with their manager at least several times a day. Now, as a busy manager, somebody who's out of the office quite a bit because I travel, and having a global workforce, that's really hard to do if we're going to do it face-to-face all the time. So how can you enable your workforce to give feedback? Well, you can do it on the computer, you can do it at home, you can do it on a mobile app, you can do it on your iPhone, you can do it on your iPad. That all constitutes feedback. But we've got to make feedback relevant. Feedback is not, in this example I thought was pretty funny, one of my sales guys has a daughter, she's a millennial, and she recently graduated from university, and she's working for an advertising agency, and her first piece of feedback from her manager was a Post-it note that was stuck on her computer that said, "Great job," on one of the projects that she was working on. Now, to me, it's nice, right? It's a great thought. It's recognition. She's been working on some really tough work, working a lot of overtime, but it's a little dated in the way that the feedback was given. A better way would have been for the manager to be able to publish in somewhere, whether it's an Enterprise 2.0 tool like Yammer or Jive or Communispace or IBM's Connections, some way so that you can give feedback that just the employee can see, or the ability to make it public so that everybody can see that recognition and praise, and other people can collaborate with her on that as well. So informal feedback all year long, being driven from multiple areas on multiple things that you're working on, is crucial. Now, formal feedback, there's also a lot of buzz in the industry on the question of, should we do away with ratings? And several organizations have moved in that direction. Other organizations are not sure if they should move in that direction. Well, from a millennial perspective, and I think this even expands beyond millennials, I believe that combining informal with formal feedback, and that formal feedback doesn't necessarily have to be a performance review. It could be 360 feedback on particular competencies or job functions, but combining those two together, I think, is the most strategic way to drive performance, focus, transparency, and engagement in an organization. And I say that because sometimes in an informal environment, what we've seen is there are not a lot of introverts that publish things online. So a lot of that informal feedback are given to the people who communicate a lot online. So it tends to focus on certain segments of your work population. And that's good, and I'm not saying that that's bad. But in addition to that, I think it's good when you can go through that informal feedback and kind of get some collective insights from peers and from other people, and then combine that in a formal way through a 360 or a performance review. Because part of HR's job is not only to drive engagement, but you also still have a duty to protect the company. And if you have to fall back on something, I think it's kind of nice to have that formal, documented way to be able to show the official feedback from and on your employees. So I think a combination of the two are the most ideal way to handle informal feedback and bringing that together. Now, after kind of that feedback and that engagement, as I said, the second thing that they care about, another key, is career mobility. And what does career mobility really mean? Well, what millennials are asking is, what internal opportunities are available to me? We shouldn't have to go search on external job boards to find the opportunities that our company is listing. We shouldn't necessarily just have to rely on an outdated intranet that's listing opportunities, or in some cases they're not just listed at all because somebody's just doing some employee referrals. We need to think about this in a strategic way, and if we're going to hire and spend the money to recruit, we have to be able to constantly recruit internally for roles that we have open, because it's much more powerful to recruit employees you know and trust than to bring new people on board, and it's a lot more cost effective. Secondly, how do I move between roles? I have yet to find more than 30 or 40 companies that I've worked with that can answer that question. Employees want to know, how do I go not just from marketing specialist to marketing manager to marketing director, but how do I go between marketing sales or sales and business development? And how do I advance? How do I advance? Really what they're asking is, well, if I want to make that move from marketing coordinator to sales coordinator, what skills am I lacking? And how are you, HR, providing me with the resources that I need to close the gap? Or do I just have to go spend tons of time looking on Google thinking I'm going to find the right communications course to close the gap that's going to be important for this company? So I need to be able to answer these questions before I even think about doing some level of career mobility internally. Now, our way of thinking, meaning my generation, and I kind of fit between Boomer and X, we grew up on career ladders. It was all about vertical movement. When I came in and I was the former marketing coordinator, I wanted to be the VP of marketing. I had no other ambitions to move across the organization. So if we kind of look at this, this is just a very cursory example. If I'm in, just say, a mid-sized company and I start as a product coordinator, you know, I may have 4 or 5 moves to get to VP. Or if I'm the marketing coordinator in the middle and I might want to become the vice president of marketing, we can see those moves up. Those are traditionally, and even today, how a lot of people think about career development. Where I see HR organizations making a mistake is that they call career development training. So it's training on how to be a better communicator or how to learn Excel. When employees are giving you feedback on your surveys about career development, what they are really referring to is, how do I make a career move? How do I build a career roadmap in this organization so that I can gain new skills? It's not just about moving up the career ladder. It's truly moving across the career lattice. And I think the career lattice is a powerful term, and a term that I think suits organizations well, because as you know, there are only so many moves one can make up. If you start to think about lateral movement, it's really powerful, because then you have more moves that an employee can make that are in the same pay grade, if you will, or job grade, but allows them to gain what they're really after, and that is new responsibilities and new skills. What we can look at from that perspective is, if I want to go from marketing coordinator to sales coordinator, what I need to be able to tell them is, you're lacking 12 skills, 13 capabilities, and 2 qualifications. That is fundamentally what career development is all about. And I have done prior to being the CEO of TalentGuard, I had a coaching business, and 100% of our coaching clients were employed, and 100% of them wanted help with career road mapping. This is career road mapping. So I think it's imperative as an organization that you think about how can you, as an HR professional, communicate career opportunities across the lattice, and that's up and across. But I also want to note that it's important for you to think about how do you enable people to decelerate. And I say that because I think there's a segment out there called baby boomers who are reaching retirement, who don't want to necessarily retire, but they don't want to travel 100% of the time anymore. They would be happy to decelerate into other roles within your organization. So how do we make those roles available to the population so that we can maintain that intellectual knowledge asset longer? So just some food for thought and some insight when you're thinking about career latticing. It doesn't necessarily have to be up and across. It can also be down. Now, I think Deloitte did some outstanding research on ladder versus lattices that I'd like to share with you here. And they did this. They have this book out called Mass Career Customization, and I think they've touched the surface on what really matters in the workforce when we're thinking about lattice. In the old-fashioned way, right? It's really just up and down. It's hierarchical. But when they started to look at the corporate lattice, what they started to notice was it was more about that move up, and it was more about the experience that an employee has in an organization that integrates not only the skills that they gain, but the work-life balance that they want to have as they progress in their age over the course of their career. So what I might want as a 20-year-old, millennial might be different in my 30s because I'm starting a family and having babies, which might be different when my kids go back to school, which might be different in my retirement. And how can you manage those levers in an organization over time, which we call preferences, to ensure that my preferences and what I'm interested in and what the organization needs are in alignment. So I encourage you to learn more about that on their website. But what they also proved through numerous case studies and engagements, and what TalentGuard has also found through our own experience, is that the lattice truly does unleash economic value. What that really means is if we are engaging people on a lattice and engaging them to work in our companies the way that they want to, we are going to see significant corporate performance improvement, whether it's on engagement, whether it's on revenue per employee. There are massive studies, and this is just some of the statistics that I thought were very interesting, that will lead to peak performance in your company. And finally, this goes to the point about what really matters. And in the lattice, what people, especially millennials, are looking at, and I think I think this feeds right into what millennials want. And the three kind of access points are work options, career options, and then participation. And what that really means is if we look at career, what are my rewards going to look like? And rewards are not just financial. A reward is a career move, and a lateral move is a reward. Am I going to fit within the role? Am I going to fit within the culture? Am I going to fit with what I want at that stage of my life? And how am I going to have that personal growth where my work and my life are intermingled together? What are my work options? When can I make changes? Where can I do it? I really want to look at the horizon outside of my core department. I want to see other departments. I want to see other branches, other locations, other states, and other countries. How can I start to look beyond my four walls where I sit in my cube? And then how am I going to get there? How long is it going to take? What skills do I need to fill? How do I fill those skills? What resources are available to me? And then the participation really is about the collaboration. How do I engage other people in the organization if I want a particular role, who are in those roles, who can be good mentors and coaches to me? So we've got to have a way as an organization to bring this into the environment and enable people to act upon it. So how do we act upon it? And this is an example that we use of a snapshot of our career lattice and how we've built a lot of what customers have asked for, what Deloitte has been pitching, into a model that enables employees to truly take control of their career, where it's more than just training. How do I build my future? How do I build my career path from where I am now to where I want to be? And there's not just one path. There are going to be many paths. The average person who builds a path will build 4 or 5 different ones. They'll build a path. How do I go from marketing coordinator to VP of sales? How do I go from marketing coordinator to CEO? How do I go from marketing coordinator to technical expert? They just want to do what-if scenarios, so we need to enable them with the tools that help them get there. And in each of those scenarios, you have to be able to provide just a few bits of data. What percentage match am I? And that match is based on the employee's talent profile, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the HR job role profiles. And this isn't, I don't want to get into how do you build that career path framework. I do have another webinar online that you can get in the Learning Center that goes step by step by step what you need to do as an organization in order to actually deploy something like this. Really want to stay on the millennial path here, but you have to be able to provide that level of data so that they can dream about what's possible in your company, which will then in turn engage and retain them. But remember, it doesn't stop there. I told you that we also have to listen, learn, and collaborate. Well, having a tool is just one part of it and enabling to build those career paths. But now what if I want to see what job vacancies are available internally? Well, as I am building my career path and I'm selecting specific jobs, I need to be able to see at my fingertips in an integrated way what job vacancies are available, because it may or may not impact my decision to move in that direction. And in addition to that, who else in my organization or in the roles that I'm interested in? I want to follow them. This is that Enterprise Social 2.0. This is really how you bring it together. And then I have the choice as an employee to keep it private to myself. I don't want to share it with anybody. I want to be able to share my plan with my manager, then I should be able to do so. If I want to publish my plan to the entire company and have them collaborate on it and give me feedback on it, I should be able to do so. These are the sorts of things, when you bring these 3 concepts together, that will enable those millennials to have that employee career development experience that they're looking for that I have not yet seen in any organization today. So that's just a way to make it happen. Now, what they're really after in that career path, as I mentioned, is they want the ability for HR to serve up, and this is going to be custom to every organization. Even though we have best practices and standards for what we think it is, each company is going to want to customize it. But what they're truly after is, tell me, HR, if I truly want to go from marketing coordinator to sales coordinator, tell me the skills that I'm lacking. How many skills am I lacking, and what percentage match am I? But that's only the beginning. We also have to say, here's how you close the gap. So there have been significant investments in learning management systems, but what I find is only 1% of the organization is using the learning management system. It sits as a catalog that's static. Well, being able to tie your gaps that organizational development team or the HR team has defined to your learning management resources is profound. If you don't have learning management resources, then you can link up to free resources. You can link up to YouTube. You can link up to universities that have all these initiatives to close the gap. But we have to be able to lead the millennials to the water, because if you can't support development on the back end after they've done all these career pathing projects, it's going to go on deaf ears, and they're still going to leave in that 2-year time frame. So HR's part in this is enabling the framework, enabling the structure, and enabling the development to happen, which is the 3rd key. So when they're thinking about what are my gaps, we want them to really think about, and what you need to provide up is something that looks like this, and I just put this in Excel spreadsheet just to show you an example, but there's software that serves it up. You need to be able to say, if you have a gap, here's your gap, here's how many gaps you have, here's where you're a fit, now go develop it and track it in that development plan, and we're just showing you here an example of one. And what the millennials want you to do is they want their managers to engage on it. They want to track where they're at. They want to see who else is working on a development goal that is similar. They want to allow people to like it. They want to engage on it. They want to have social feedback on it. So this is how it could look in your organization. And you might just use a Yammer tool, and that's a tool good enough for you. And I think tools like that are fantastic. But what we also found is when you're providing very open pie-in-the-sky feedback, how do you tie it to something relevant? What I like about what performance management and talent management vendors are doing is integrating it into a process that's relevant at the time of need and at the time of want. So when you're able to do that, managers and HR professionals can go back and look at feedback in a context of a given goal or a given objective or a performance review period or a career journal or a 360 plan, whatever that may be, so that it's really relevant over time as you continue to build on the performance of your company. So again, this is just an example of where feedback can be really important, either in an open way or a group way, or you can keep it private. Now, having said that, how are you going to get there? Well, the first thing is you need to have a career framework, and I would encourage you to go to the TalentGuard Resource Center and look under Building a Career Development Framework. You have to have a framework first. And in that framework, there are a couple of things that I'll highlight here beyond just building out the career framework that you must do as an organization to be effective in whatever form. And we believe automation is key, whether it's with us or someone else. I'm just trying to give you the fundamentals of what's required and what it looks like. First and foremost, you got to have a competency model, and we believe a competency model per job role that is standardized and specific and that has clear expectations on the competencies, the indicators, the levels for every role. You have to enable employees to track their preferences and their aspirations. I want you to know about me. Right now, I haven't seen that really tracked anywhere. As I said in the beginning, they have to have the big picture, and we have to be able to do big picture through goals and objectives, and that has to be firmly based on a vision and mission that they believe in with social responsibility. You have to have learning resources that close the gaps. Again, whether I said it's from your existing LMS, whether you have an org development team that puts something on a SharePoint, whatever it may be, we have to teach them how to close the gap because we don't want them guessing. You have to have standardized job role profiles and indicators that are clear, and you have to have the ability to have a feedback and recognition loop that engages the employee in the way that they want to be engaged. And as we said with millennials, it's almost 3 times a day from their manager, never mind all the peers that come along with it. So if you need to collect and gather all these data points, and you may be doing that through disparate systems now, some may be automated, some may be in folders, some may be on paper, if you're going to have a strategic talent management program and initiative, as Burson, a leading that's owned by Deloitte also, Burson says you've got to bring these things together in a unified way. So when you're thinking about and assessing what you have in your organization for your millennials, when they come in, they're going to evaluate you from day one. You got to think about how you automate these things. And it's got to be within a process, as we said. If it's just in the open and it's feedback all day long just to give feedback, it's not relevant, and it's going to be hard to track those performance improvement KPIs. So we just think about it in a very simple term. We have to have a mechanism for employees to learn, collaborate, and develop. And then we have to repeat that process over and over again. In the next few slides, I'm just going to walk you through some screenshots and some fundamental areas that are required to make this happen. Meaning, if you want to engage in millennials, if you want to retain them more than 2 years, you're going to have to automate. And we're not promoting automating with TalentGuard, but that's what we do, and that's part of telling that story is how can you do it in a seamless way. So when you're thinking about your career framework, you have got to have an ability for employees to assess their own skills, have the manager assess and endorse the skills that the employees believe that they have. And when we say skills, this is not just for their job. It's all of their skills. All too often, We hire an employee and they have skills beyond what we see on their resume, but we don't enable them to tell us about those skills. And then we forget about those skills because we put the resume in a database, and as that millennial moves on and on with different managers, they don't know all the experiences that come with that employee. So being able to capture in a holistic way all of those employees' skills, what they do in their volunteer work outside of the office, is profound. Now, how do we track their experiences over time? We need to be able to enable them to capture their job rotations, capture the learning that they're doing. And this is really important for organizations that have like IT project work where they have to show the employees' profiles and show over time, here's all the things that they've worked on. Being able to do that over the course of an employee's employment tenure is profound, because that data gets richer and richer, and HR and managers are able to search on that. Qualifications, do they have a bachelor's degree? Do they have a master's degree? Are they going for a doctorate degree? How many degrees do they have? How many certifications? How many training courses have they have? It always stops when the employee is hired. How now can we enrich that by tracking that stuff over time? And in terms of preferences, how do they tell me what really gets them excited? Now, these are just the 4 points. I'm just going to show you an example of what that might look like in an actual screenshot. So building the talent profile. Many organizations that we work with already have HRIS systems, and that's the fundamental catalyst for getting employee data. But typically, that's just your standard employee data, your pay grade, your department, your manager. We have to really go beyond that, because that's where we start the employee's experience. Let's track their education. Let's put their work history in there. And I always say, if you already have an ATS, your ATS should be shifting all of that work history into some level of talent profile that you can then go do a keyword search on or a structured search on later on. And this is something that should be updated. We always say on the profile once a year at a minimum, but typically people are updating it twice a year. So being able to enable the employee to do that on the first track. Then we talk to those skills, experiences, and qualifications. So giving an employee to assess what level they're at on the competencies for their role and beyond. And then if they're doing 360s, if they're doing performance, that information should be shifting into that talent profile to make it richer and deeper every time you ask them to do something across those disparate assessments. So enabling that profile to be richer over time is an extremely valuable tool for you, and having the ability for managers to endorse it, I think, is critical so that employees don't over-assess themselves. Now, the preferences. How do we know what an employee is really interested in? And preferences really are all up to you. It's what you care about in your organization. Is it flex time? Is it work time? Is it remote access? Is it being a virtual workforce? Is it international expansion? You need to think about those things from your surveys that matter to your culture. And then give employees ways to give their input, whether it's a preference, a likable preference, not a preference, whatever it may be. Then you also have to give employees a platform to say, here are the roles that I'm interested in. I'm not just interested in marketing, I'm interested in sales. So how can I help the sales leader start to think about my employee over time as a potential asset when we're doing our succession planning and our talent management reviews with the executive team? Then on the development side, how do we bring it together and enable them to collaborate and develop all year long on your talent management initiative? And as I said in the beginning, if you're not providing it in an automated way for millennials, they're going to leave because this is what they're used to. Now, how do you bring together the informal feedback and the formal feedback so that we can have meetings and engagements with our managers and with our peers so that we can make the information more objective and not so subjective over time? Well, you got to bring all that feedback together in a consistent way all year long so that everybody can see it. And that's really what we're calling development. No matter what you're doing through a process, enable that collaboration, enable that development, and serve up the resources that are going to fill the gap. Now, why is that important to HR? I think this is a fundamental, pivotal point. And I get this all the time from CEOs. When a CEO says to an HR person, I want you to tell me What 4 people in our organization are ready to take over the VP of marketing role, for instance? The HR person's like, I'm not really sure. I'd have to go ask the managers. The managers aren't really sure. So how can you, from an objective standpoint, start to think about forecasting your talent based on what your workforce is going to need in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever it may be? How can we start to put millennials in a talent pool based on how they're developing with our organization? Your job as an HR professional is to develop talent, and you have to develop talent that you can identify. So how can you, for example, start to say, I want to find somebody who's willing to work in Latin America, who has this level of skill, who has these experiences, these qualifications, who have held these roles, and match my profile. You know, show me anybody who's at least 50% or above on a match. And that's what this screen is showing. So if you can start to see that in a very objective way, you can bring to the executive team and say, look, this is what you've asked for, this is what we have. Let's dig in to each of these profiles. Let's now truly create objective talent pools that we can then make determinations on. Do we want to develop this pool as a group? Do we want to highlight certain high potentials and develop them as individuals and advance their development? You're able to make those decisions on the fly so that you can truly do succession planning on the back end. And that's critical to the CEO. So this feeds right into the CEO agenda. And if you're going to have talent pools, the only way you're going to have talent pools is if you're retaining employees. So it goes back to, how do you bring it together? How do you develop your employees? How do you enable them to collaborate? And how does HR benefit from this from a forecasting perspective and from a data analytics? Because there's nothing worse than having people leave when you can't anticipate the tenure risk or the flight risk, for example. Now, that sums up some of the keys that specifically relate to millennials. And again, they focused on communication is imperative, first and foremost. But how do you deliver communication in a way that enables, one, career mobility, that enables engagement around career pathing, and that enables employees to develop their career over the long term, and it's not just a training plan? We believe those 3 keys are imperative to maximize the experience for millennials and really make it count. So a few words about TalentGuard. We are a full-service talent management software company. We have many modules that span across from hire to retire, 360, performance, applicant tracking, career pathing is really what we were talking about today, succession planning, our development, which is really coaching and feedback, and learning management. So I encourage you to reach out to us if you have any interest at all in learning more about how we handle consulting from a millennial perspective, or help you deploy the automation that you need in order to retain those millennials. And right now I will leave the platform open for Q&A. I'm happy to answer any questions either in this forum and or via email, and that email you can just send to info@talentguard.com. And I really want to thank you for attending this webinar. I hope that you found the information in the format useful. For those of you that have been here before, you know my format was a little different. I do it more in terms of case studies, but I thought there were so many interesting stats that I wanted to make sure that we got those into the presentation. And as you know, my goal is always to kind of bring you 1 or 2 insight or aha moments, and I hope that you did. I'm open to feedback, and I want to wish you a wonderful, happy Wednesday.